is Remi.
Mr. Barbier, this is Joe Springer from Tendies Club. How are you?
I'm well, and yourself, sir?
I am very well. Thank you so much for taking some time to speak to us. We're live streaming on YouTube. We've got hundreds of people watching, and we'll put it up. I'm sure thousands will be watching. I know how busy you are. Thank you so much for taking the time. I've got 10 questions for you. Do you have some time for us?
Absolutely.
Hey, all
And
right.
no, thank you for for taking time to ask these questions. The public aspects of Cassava Sciences it's really an important part of what we're doing because it educates people, but it also allows people to come to their own sensible and reasonable judgment about the value of what we're doing. So to me, this is a very important part of my job. So
Great.
anyway, let's start.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Great. So, everybody here, you have your sort of the fan club here. But for those new to the story, can you tell us a little bit about Cassava Sciences?
Sure. So Cassava Sciences was actually I started the company in my living room back in 1998, right after I had finished my tenure at Exelixis. And at the time, OxyContin, the infamous OxyContin, had been approved by FDA and was being launched, and sales were going through the roof. What I noticed very early on were some very difficult, very technical problems with OxyContin. And basically, I was one of the first ones to ring the bell on OxyContin and say, look, you can't just go by sales. You really need to look at the nature of the drug itself. I think there are some severe problems that's going to cause a big social problem if we don't kind of uh,
Yeah.
take a closer look at it. In any event,
Yeah.
long story short, in addition to ringing the bell on OxyContin, and we had a congressional hearing in the whole 9 yards, and of course, no one was listening because it was the Purdue family and
Yep.
and the Sackler family, and how could a billionaire
The
family
dollars,
could be
of
wrong, right?
course. Right.
And huge dollars. Um, and in any event, we also came up with a better solution, um, a drug that offers pain relief, much like OxyContin, but that pretty much eliminated many of the drawbacks, many of the technical problems of OxyContin. And initially, the FDA was very, very encouraging. And each time we got closer to the finish line, it was almost like they moved the goalpost on us. And it happened a couple of times, and we were scratching our heads, going, "What's going on here?" I mean, at that point, people were dying on OxyContin.
Yeah.
It had not become a headline issue yet for the national media,
Yeah.
but people were dying. That was clear. In any event, they kept moving the goalpost on us, and they kept moving it. And after what 3 or 4 tries, we said, "You know what? We get it." Perhaps shame on us for realizing it took several tries, but the FDA just didn't, or I should say the analgesic division of the FDA just did not have the stomach
Well,
to approve another opioid, despite the safety features of
right.
our drug. Um, Horrible travesty of the regulatory policy, in my opinion, but that's a separate story for another day. At the same time, we had reinvested a little bit of the money that we got from doing some rather good deals with big pharma, Pfizer in particular. We had reinvested in basic research, just asking the question, how do opioids work? Believe it or not, opioids are probably one of the oldest drug in the pharmacopoeia, but we still, to this day, we still do not know how opioids work. So we were just paying scientists to ask the basic the questions,
Mhm.
and they did. And one of the observations is that, and I'm going to fast forward and skip a whole lot of technical details, but basically, one of the observations the scientists came to is that the opioid receptor is in fact implicated with filament A. And in particular, we noticed that filament A had a funny shape in certain patients for certain diseases. We narrowed it down to Alzheimer's disease, and our initial reaction was, "This is cool. We can use this altered form of filament A as a blood-based diagnostic to actually detect and perhaps the stage the presence of Alzheimer's disease." That was originally the goal.
Wow.
When we moved away entirely from analgesia, in 2019, we also changed the name just to clean slate.
Hmm.
We changed the name to Cassava Sciences. Yes, I do live on Cassava Drive, in case anyone's wondering, in Austin. um, but we changed the name and focused 100% on Alzheimer's disease, both with the blood-based investigational diagnostic, but more importantly, we also came up with a concept that said, if this altered protein, if altered filament A is found in brains of Alzheimer's patients, is there a drug we can develop to actually restore the proper shape and function of filament A? And again, I am skipping massive amounts of
Yeah,
important details, but for this purpose, I think we can.
sure.
Long story short is that yes, we did come up with a small molecule, a proprietary small molecule, and in fact, a family of molecules that are intended to restore the proper shape and function of filament A. And we ran our drug in all sorts of animal studies for animal models of Alzheimer's disease, um, cell culture, postmortem tissue, you name it, we did it. And each time we ran an experiment, we found very intriguing effects. We published, honestly, we had a tough time publishing some of the early studies just because people were saying much of a lot of the things they were saying now, which is, no one's ever done this before. How can this be? And our reaction was, well, you should publish it because no one's ever done it before. That's, if you
All
only publish
innovation.
stuff that's been, yeah, that's the very nature of innovation. Um, so we did it the long, slow way. We really did a lot of animal models, a lot of tissue models before filing the IND. I call it slow drug development. We took I want to say over 10 years to go from small molecule to actual patients.
Wow.
And once we went into, we filed the IND with the FDA. It was accepted within 30 days. We then went into human volunteers and saw very clean safety, which is a very, very important concept to us. We then did a small phase 2A, is what we called it. It was a small study, 13 patients, open label. And because the numbers are so small, we said, you know what, let's only look at biomarker, or let's predominantly look, I shouldn't say only, let's predominantly look at biomarkers. Why biomarkers? Because biomarkers don't lie.
Right.
There's no placebo effect with biomarkers. Either they move up or down or they stay stable. And that's what we did. We looked at biomarkers in the brain, CSF, cerebral spinal biomarkers, and we saw very intriguing effects. And we were very excited about these effects. We we sent the effects to our advisors and NIH and anyone who's in a position to help us. And I think there was a universal reaction of this is pretty cool, but it's an open label study.
Right.
So you really need to repeat it. And if it replicates in a randomized placebo-controlled trial, then we can get much more excited about things. Fair enough. So we applied for and received an NIH grant to do a phase 2, what we call a phase 2B, consisting of 64 patients. These are all patients with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. And that's an important concept because I think one of the one of the crazy comments, or perhaps crazier comments I've heard, is that we're not really looking at patients with Alzheimer's disease. Well, not only is that statement an insult and disrespectful to these patients,
Right.
but it's patently false. The patients we've worked with were previously diagnosed with MCI or dementia or something prior to coming into our studies. Anyway,
Yep.
64 patients, dosed them for 28 days, much like the phase 2A. And guess what? We saw very intriguing biomarker effects. And again, for me and for us, biomarkers don't lie.
Right.
They're there or they're not. And remember that biomarkers were all analyzed under blinded conditions. In other words, the CUNY lab and the other lab, everyone receives a 96-well plate in which are day 0 samples or day 28 samples or controlled samples, or basically there's no way to tell. The samples all look the same. They all smell the same. There's nothing to distinguish the samples. And the scientists analyze each sample, not knowing what they're actually analyzing,
Right.
and they come up with
Placebo
results.
or not. Yep.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, or placebo or drug or dose. So we analyzed the CSF analytes, and sure enough, we saw very intriguing CSF movements, something that had never been seen before in Alzheimer's disease. There are drugs that can, or I should say may, move one or two biomarkers at once, but to my knowledge, no drug candidate for Alzheimer's disease has ever moved an entire panel of biomarkers.
Right.
And that's what gets us excited. From there, we talked to the FDA about doing a large-scale safety and efficacy program. And it was kind of a fork in the road. We could have done a large phase 2, or for a few more patients and a few more dollars, we could have run the same study as a phase 3. So we decided to run a phase 3. But before running the phase 3, we also decided to do an open label study of cemiphalam in patients with Alzheimer's disease. In this open label study, we had pre-planned analyses at 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months. And these are pre-planned analyses on the first 50 patients to receive drugs at each time point. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And we also had biomarkers on 25 patients. And sure enough, biomarkers showed remarkable, we think remarkable effects.
Yep.
After 3 months of dosing. But what's very intriguing is an actual improvement on ADAS-Cog 11, ADAS-Cog 11, both at 6, 9, and 12 months. I want to say that I would be ecstatic to just maintain
Oh, yeah.
ADAS-Cog scores, but here we actually saw an improvement. Will the improvement hold over a full year and 200 patients? I certainly hope so. But again, I would be happy with just maintaining.
Of course.
Because by maintaining ADAS-Cog 11, what you're really saying is you're kind of giving these patients another year or two of quality of life. And really, that's what they want. Now, I also have to add all the caveats. It's an open label safety study. So first and foremost, we're looking for signs of safety signals. And as far as we can tell, there are no safety signals. It's an eminently safe drug to date.
Yep.
The cognition scores are, all I can say is the treatment effects are very intriguing. We are not the first company to do an open label study in this type of Alzheimer's patients. And to my knowledge, no other open label study has shown treatment effects like we've shown.
I haven't seen one either. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just don't, if it's out there, I don't know about it. Um, so, you might ask, well, why do an open label study in front of a phase three? Why not do what everyone else does, which is a phase three study, and then you do your open label study? Well, a couple reasons. Number one, you have to remember that that Alzheimer's R&D has a terrible, horrible record. It's basically been 30 years of failure.
Yeah.
And I mean that 30 years where every single freaking phase three study has failed. That's, that's a mind boggling record. We cannot give up. We shouldn't give up. On the other hand, you hope that industry and companies and investigators learn from 30 years of effort, failed effort. So what we've learned is if a drug has no treatment effects in an open label study, there's just no way. I just cannot conceive of a way that such a drug would work under more, controlled
Right.
environment.
So right. So a good safeguard to make sure you're not spending $100 million on something that wouldn't work, or whatever the phase threes will cost. So you ran that study
Exactly.
first. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Now, the opposite, of course, is not true. Just because you see something interesting on ADAS-Cog in an open label doesn't mean, and it has really zero predictive value of what you might see in a phase three. On the other hand, I strongly believe what I said earlier, which is if you see nothing in an open label, a very large, well-designed open label study, if there's nothing there, you ain't got a chance in
Right.
your phase three.
Right. Right. Great.
So I believe the FDA agrees with with what I just said to the extent that they did give us a special protocol assessment for our phase three study, our phase three program. I'm sorry.
So what is the
What is
special protocol assessment?
you beat me. I was just about to say. So special protocol assessment is it's less than a contract, but more than a handshake from FDA to a company that basically says we all agree on the key features of a phase three program. Okay, so number of patients, type of patients, dosing period, most importantly, the clinical endpoints. It's basically a way of saying we've all sat down, we've all discussed and agreed on the key design features of the phase three program.
Great.
That's where we are, and I
I've,
hope
I've
you're
heard
aware,
I've heard of other companies having run their phase three program without special protocol assessment. And in the end, it was like this study was not designed very well. You ran this whole study and it wasn't designed very well. So that's an excellent thing you guys that you meet with them first to talk about the design of the studies. So that's very valuable.
yeah, and remember what I said: 30-year history of failure in Alzheimer's disease R&D. We cannot give up. We should not give up. On the other hand, we need to learn. The industry needs to learn from 30 years of failure.
Yep.
That's our takeaway. And for us, doing an open label study in front of a phase three is a point of learning.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense.
Getting two SPAs is a point of learning.
Excellent. And you had brought this up, but in one of your press releases, you had mentioned some of the safeguards that were in place. You had mentioned some of these things, and I do want to talk about the phase threes because now you've launched these very important, critical phase three studies. But just if we can spend another second on the 12-month open labels, you had talked about some of the safeguards in place. But do you mind being a little bit more, giving us a little more color on the safeguards in place, like electronic data capture, the chain of custody, and the number of independent parties involved that do in fact ensure the integrity of the 12-month open label data that has been it's been called into question when it really should not have been.
I agree with what you just said. It should not have been, but it's there. There is this small but very vocal group of, I guess you'd have to call them haters, who basically question everything we do. I mean everything.
Everything.
Normally, the chain of custody, the electronic capture, and this is bread and butter stuff for any biotech company. But because there is so much noise, there are so many allegations,
Outlandish.
outlandish
I've had two separate
stuff.
people tell me, "Did you know that simifilam is pure LSD?" Two separate occasions.
Well, okay, the interview's over then, huh? Um, yeah, no, I've heard some of the crazy stuff as well, and you just shake your hand because at the end of the day, all humor aside, we are attempting to we're aiming high. We're attempting to provide a drug treatment for patients who have Alzheimer's disease. Probably one of the worst, maybe not the worst, but certainly up, in top five worst diseases that can afflict a person, especially at end of life. You
Yeah,
go through life, all the ups and downs. You've arrived at a certain age, and then boom, your memory is robbed.
right.
It's
It's one of the only
it's not a
diseases
pretty sight.
you can't say goodbye in the
Yeah.
proper way. Right.
Yeah, you can't even say hello, let alone
Well, that's
goodbye.
true too.
So anyway, to your point, we just sat down and said, you know what? Let's be crystal clear. Even though this is bread and butter stuff, let's be crystal clear about how investigator sites collect data from study subjects, how the sites enter the clinical data directly into a computer system. The computer system is managed by an outside vendor. The vendor maintains the database, and at our request, the vendor transmits the data directly to independent statisticians. The statisticians do their thing. They report the news to us. We sit down, format it into a press release. There we go. Again, it's this, like I call it bread and butter, but just to address some of, or perhaps to curtail additional craziness, we just thought it might make sense to speak about the chain of custody.
Good thinking, I think. Yeah, great. And so, so importantly, now you've begun not just not just one phase three with the SPA, but you've begun both phase three programs with the special protocol assessment. Huge, important, probably, and maybe even very historic programs. How is it going with those two programs?
It's going well. We are focusing on getting as many clinical sites as quickly as we can. And then we'll focus on getting as many patients into those sites as we can. A little bit of headwinds around COVID,
Yeah,
meaning that a lot of excuse me, a lot of hospitals, a lot of physician sites sort of lost their personnel during the year and a half, 2 years of COVID.
yeah,
So some sites have told us, look, we're interested, but we need to hire this person or that person. That's probably an industry-wide observation. I don't
hmm,
think it's a
sure.
Cassava Sciences observation, but we have a good number of sites up and running. We have a great CRO called
Hmm.
Premier Research. They have done many neuroscience um, um, clinical studies,
Now that's a clinical
including large.
research organization. I'm not sure everybody knows that.
Oh, good point. I take this stuff for granted. So Premier Research is what's called a clinical research or a CRO, clinical research organization, and they essentially supplement the internal team at Cassava Sciences to go out and find sites, find patients, find the right vendors, connect all these vendors together, maintain that sense of independence between the clinical sites and the company. Um, it's what they do. They charge an arm and a leg, but we think we picked the right one.
Yep, great. Okay, super. And then not only are you doing this sort of under the auspices of the special protocol assessment from the FDA, you're also doing this with funding from the government as well. the National Institute on Aging, a division of the National Institute of Health, has given you repeated funding starting, I think, in 2017. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So one of the, I suppose, the better programs, better government programs around is the NIH. The NIH is focused on very much so, or at least certainly the part of the NIH we're talking to, is focused on innovations, things that perhaps Wall Street or private investors would never want to touch because it's new, it's different, it's innovative. NIH is not afraid to roll up its sleeves and take a chance.
Good.
That said, it is a highly, highly competitive program. Someone once told me that for every NIH grant that is, or every grant that is actually provided to a company, there are something like 100 applicants. Is the math correct? I don't know, but that's what I was told. So
Wow.
it's not a shotgun approach. It's more of a very, very meticulous process that goes through peer review, and outside independent scientists have to actually look at the data, look at the thesis, make sure there's something there, so that they're not funding crazy stuff like as you put it, LSD or whatever. So yes, we've been very successful based on peer review on getting NIH involved with our innovation.
Great. And then, your company is relatively small. You guys are growing. You're sort of growing, I guess, in leaps and bounds a little bit these days. But you're still a small company, and AD, especially relative to the problem of AD, Alzheimer's disease, one of the biggest diseases in the world. Will Cassava be able to meet the need? Will Cassava be able to manufacture drug for such a large population?
Fair question. We are small by design. I've worked with big companies. I've worked with small companies. I've grown small companies into mega companies and the reverse. And I can tell you that small companies work best. For all sorts of reasons. There's more of a motivation factor, there's less bureaucracy, there's more ability to get stuff done as opposed to just sit in meetings all day. So we actually pride ourselves on being able to potentially make a huge difference in clinical medicine on a relatively small in-house team.
Yeah.
That said, we obviously leverage the in-house team with, for example, our CRO, with outside manufacturing vendors, and so forth. Your question, can we make the drug ourselves to satisfy the market? Good question. I
Big
don't know
market.
yet. I
Yeah.
don't know yet.
Yeah.
It's a massive market.
Yeah.
To some extent, I don't worry about that as much because we have a small molecule which is relatively easy to synthesize, as certainly as compared to making a, say, a
Biologic.
monoclonal antibody,
Right.
a biologic. And there are plants out there that can be ramped up, I think, relatively quickly. We're also working with one of the largest drug companies or chemical companies in the world called Evonik, headquartered in I think Germany, but they have offices all over the world. Evonik makes the actual simiflam, the active ingredient, and then we use other contractors to turn the simiflam powder into actual pills.
Ah.
But it's a fair question. I don't have a good answer, not yet.
Okay, great. I appreciate the honesty, the candor. Okay, so let's have some fun here. Let's fast forward 5 or 10 years. What does Cassava Sciences look like? You mentioned in a local Austin interview that you want to turn Austin into a hub for the biotech industry. In fact, you purchased a new campus with 2 buildings. Can you tell us about your long-range plans and dreams for the company, or maybe even some additional things that can be done with your technology?
So based on what we know of the science and the consistency of data, which is very important, because remember, 30 years of failure in Alzheimer's R&D, based on the consistency of data, and the strength of the science, we are absolutely 100% planning for success.
Awesome. And Cap, this little throw in here. So, I mean, you've got Elon Musk down there. You think you can get him on the board, or you think he'll probably want to be on the board? I assume. One can only assume.
Something tells me you put Remi and Elon Musk in a room, and you know, we'll be at each other's throats. I have a lot of respect for the man, but he and I probably think alike on many different levels. Think big,
Yeah.
shoot for the stars, hire the best people you can, get involved in everything. Don't be afraid of naysayers,
Yeah.
haters will hate, that type of thing.
Yeah.
He's been through it. In some regards, I have a lot of respect for the man because for a lot of reasons, but he's been through everything Cassava Sciences is going through right now,
Yes.
and he showed them.
Yeah.
He showed them,
Just
and I
simply
think we're
having a
going to
new
do the same.
technology is enough to have the haters hate. And you're right. He showed
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, can you imagine the idea of building a new car when General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler were basically the world leaders?
Yeah.
It was folly.
Right.
It was absolutely folly. Likewise, a lot of our haters say it's folly to think that 25 people in the middle of Austin are going to come up with a novel treatment for Alzheimer's disease. Well, yeah, it's all crazy, it's all folly until it becomes inevitable, and its science shows that the drug works.
That's right.
So, long way of saying we are absolutely planning for success. We think we have the goods. Obviously, the drug still needs to go through a large safety and efficacy phase 3 program, which we are doing. Um, and we'll see.
Yep. Great. I got two quick fun ones here. What's it like being married to an incredible scientist, future Nobel Prize winner, and former Olympic athlete like Lindsay, like Dr. Burns?
Loving the question, and you know what? I I rarely say no comments, but I'm going to say no comments. I'm going to
It's
cop
probably the
out of that one.
smartest of all the smart things you said. That's for the married men out there. Take note.
But put it this way, it's not a bad thing. How's
Yes,
that?
excellent. Thank you. Brilliant. And then on behalf of from the community here, so you have you and your company, you have an enthusiastic following. So the vibrant savage community supporting you guys. We want to support however we can. How else? What else can we do? How can we help you succeed?
Well, first of all, I really truly have a deep appreciation for all those who are actually following the data and investing with their brains instead of their emotions. We're a science shop, and I get it that science is hard. We try hard to kind of translate complex science into terms and press releases that almost everyone should be able to read. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we miss the mark. But all this to say that it can be a lonely fight, swimming against the tide. So very, very much support, just appreciate
Yep.
the whole community. And at the end of the day, some things go beyond money.
Yes.
Alzheimer's disease. Obviously, investors need to make a return. I get that. We get that. But some things do go beyond money. Alzheimer's disease has potential to affect all of us. I don't think there's anyone who's not aware of someone, a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, who is untouched by Alzheimer's disease. And so the ability, that one chance that maybe we really do have something, maybe the drug really does work, maybe what we're seeing in the Openlabel study is for real.
Yeah.
Let's give the drug a chance. That's all we're saying. Give
Yeah.
the drug a chance.
Yeah.
If it works, it's a great victory for humanity. If it doesn't work, okay, we've lost our time. Investors have lost one time their money. But if it works, investors can make multiple times their money.
Yes. Oh yes, yes. If this works, there's no bigger market, and you guys are a small fraction of Biogen, which is just a failure, and there's still so much. There's still and there's you can go up to the level of Pfizer. You guys have so much room for growth. If you and so with and you seem to be set up so well. So it looks like your runway is very long, and you're doing all the
Yeah, I
right
mean,
things.
don't get me started on Biogen, but at some level, it's disgraceful charging whatever it is, 60, 50, $60,000
I
for
saw
a
someone
drug
just
that has
died.
no.
One of their patients just died from an edema.
Yes, and the drug does have some known adverse effects, brain inflammation, et cetera. I mean, I, I I'm not sure how some of those people sleep at night.
I agree. I agree.
But it's not my company, not my story. Put it this way, I would never have gone to the FDA for approval with that type of data.
Yep, I agree. Well, Mr. Barbier, you've been so generous and gracious with your time. I appreciate it so much. And on behalf of really the world community, you guys are fighting the good fight. And then just the loudest people are the haters. And there's just no earthly reasonable reason. There's no reason you guys should be having any negativity come your way. So thank you guys so much on behalf of everyone and everyone's families for trying to cure this awful disease. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Yep.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care now.
Take care. How about that? That was awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm gonna wrap it up here. Maybe we'll do another show to talk about it, but I'm gonna wrap it up now and say thank you very much.